Okay.
All right, boys, we are back here. I just want to do a little video just to go over Chapter 5, Section 4 notes. All right, so the PowerPoint slides are right up there. You can get them from the content library. I just want to go over some things with you a little bit quickly. All right? All right. So when we take a look at this, all right, you want out? All right. So when we take a look at our slides, all right, we now have our Constitution. All right, we have all of this articles of Confederation stuff has been pretty much figured out. We got our big executive branch, but now what are we going to do with it? Well, it was pretty much a no-brainer that everyone was making the executive branch based around George Washington as our leader. And George Washington was going to be the one who was really going to craft the presidency as the way that we know it now. He took his oath of office in 1789. Official swearing-in ceremony is called an inauguration. All right. When we take a look at that, all right, that second slide, that was Obama's. Yes, Jude, you can get the Sixth Amendment. That was Obama's inauguration. You see everybody lined up. That's an aerial shot of it. It's pretty cool. So when he has the inauguration, he's there. And John Adams was going to be his vice president. And we'll talk a little bit more about the vice president stuff, how it was chosen a little bit later on. Or if you want to pick that for your constitutional amendment, you can learn a lot about that there. So when we take a look at the leadership that he was going to have, Washington had this great thing where he surrounded himself with men of good character, and he knew that he was going to have to choose some real smart people around him. So that's where he was going to make a cabinet. And what I want you to think of the cabinet is, I want you to think of it as experts in certain areas. Okay, it's crazy to think that one person could be an expert in all these different areas. So what Washington did was, all right, I'm going to have a Secretary of War and a Secretary of the State and the Secretary for the Treasury, and he's going to have experts that are going to be in that. So Edmund Randolph, he was going to be his Attorney General. Henry Knox, Secretary of War. Thomas Jefferson was going to be his Secretary of State, and Alexander Hamilton was going to be his Secretary of the Treasury. Those were the only ones that we've had. We've since expanded the cabinet a ton now because we need all these different areas. What we have now in the president's cabinet, and not just this, you have a Secretary for Defense, that was a Secretary of War, Secretary of State, Secretary of Commerce, Education, Energy, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, Secretary of the Interior, Transportation, Veterans Affairs, Attorney General. So all these guys are the experts, and they report to the president. So Washington started that, all right? Jefferson was going to be someone who's going to become president later on, all right? But he saw the way Washington did it, and he said, all right, this is something that we got to kind of figure out, and he did a great job of it. Washington was going to be responsible for setting precedents, all right? And precedents is something that's going to be, the definition that the book gives is an act or a statement that becomes an example, rule, or tradition to be followed, right? You set a precedent, you're the first one to do this thing. So he had a lot of precedents to set, being the first president, and a lot of things that he did, we still held true. Like, for example, he only served 2 terms. He set that precedent. He established a cabinet. He did those things. Everyone else did that after him. So we look at a little bit more of his cabinet. We see that Jefferson, we see Hamilton as well. Hamilton was going to be his Treasury secretary, a guy that pretty much had a way with numbers, a way to figure things out. Very, very smart. You can go listen to the Hamilton soundtrack, all right, the Broadway show that it was turned into, and you can learn a lot more about Alexander Hamilton. One thing that he did, he wanted to set a tone of dignity to the administration. He had regular receptions for government officials, escorted by soldiers when he traveled, very similar to the Secret Service that we have now. He won his second term. Everyone loved him. He was kind of the most popular man in the country at the time, and he was the great man. One thing that was going to need to be happened for a capital city was that they were going to need a new one, and that was part of the argument in Section 3 was how are we going to ratify the Constitution? Well, people in the South wanted it a little bit more south, so we see that one of the bargaining chips that they had was moving it a little further south in between the area between Virginia and Maryland, land that no one really wanted. Was going to become Washington, D.C. And if you even look at your literature books, you can read a great letter from John Adams